please welcome to the stage ITS America President and CEO, Laura Chase.
Welcome to Texas. It's great to be here. Yeah, you can applaud for that. It's great to be here with all of you in the Dallas area. I want to thank the Dallas Cowboys Rhythm and Blues for that fantastic, energizing performance. What a way to welcome us all to Texas. So we have a packed room here, as you can see, standing room only, and I'm really pleased to announce that we have record attendance for an ITS America annual meeting at nearly 3,000 attendees. So thanks to all of you for being here with us in Texas. I want to thank our local partners, especially TxDOT, NCTCOG, TTTI, and many, many others who aren't just talking the talk about tech, but they're walking the walk and implementing technology on our roadways, in our intersections, on our public transit systems, in our ports, and at the airport like DFW that many of us flew into just yesterday or today. At the beginning of this year, I said, ITS America is putting the deployment back in RD&D, and that is why the theme of this year's conference is Implementing Innovation for All. All of our great technology is only going to be useful if we can deploy it, if we implement it, period. We can only save lives when our technology is on vehicles, on bicycles, affixed to roadways and intersections, when we're able to access, use, and share critical data and information, creating that robust digital infrastructure layer. Which leads me to a question. Are we doing everything we can? And I ask this because about 2 weeks ago, we took spring break. You all know I'm a mother, I've got 3 kids. I've got twin 16-year-old boys and a 13-year-old daughter. So like many families, we piled in our car and we took a road trip about 550 miles north to do college visits for my boys. Our trip, thankfully, was uneventful. It was a mix of excitement, opportunity, planning for their future, and a healthy dose of sibling bickering over who had to sleep on the sofa bed. But I can't say the same for another family from our area, a family of 6, who mirrored our trip by driving about 550 miles south to Tennessee, but their trip ended in tragedy. A family of 6, 13-year-old twin girls and 2 teenage boys. They were in a fatal crash. One of the 13-year-old girls died. I found out through my 13-year-old daughter. All 3 other children were hospitalized. Technology could have prevented that crash, and so many others. In fact, the Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates there are 13 car crashes per minute in the US. This means that during the very short time that I'm giving you opening remarks, at least 65 crashes will have occurred. I believe we have a responsibility to implement these solutions so every family can return home safely. And just now, we have a greater opportunity to change that trajectory. Just yesterday, as many of you know, the FCC approved the long-awaited joint waiver to deploy C-V2X in the 5.9 gigahertz band. This provides us new momentum to implement life-saving technology. ITS America has a plan to scale connectivity, automation, and digital infrastructure to save lives, but we can't do it alone. We invite all of you to join us in implementing innovation. So my question and my charge to all of you this week, as you spend time making partnerships, learning about new technologies, hearing new announcements, what is your plan? Are you doing everything you can to implement innovation and save lives? What is your plan to save lives? We are all in this together. So now, it's my pleasure to introduce a speaker who has been a tireless champion for safety across all modes. Robin Hutchinson, who is the current administrator of the Federal Motor Carrier Association at USDOT, started at USDOT during this administration doing safety policy. And in fact, she was instrumental in creating the USDOT's first ever national roadway safety strategy. She helped secure $13 billion in additional funding for safety programs in the recent bipartisan infrastructure law. Just last September, Robin was confirmed as administrator of the FMCSA, and she has continued to make safety one of her top priorities. Previously, before coming to the Biden administration, she served in transportation roles in local government, and throughout her career, she has also been a strong, tireless advocate for women and diverse perspectives in the industry. We are so thrilled that she has made the time to join us today. So please, without further ado, welcome me in joining Administrator Hutchinson.
Laura, thank you so much for that introduction. And thank you, Laura, for starting off with the safety message. I think it sets the tone for us for this entire session today and the next few days. I also want to start by thanking the people who have helped to make this happen. Chad and Rachel, you're probably invisible out there today, but you've done a fantastic job getting us to this point. Thanks for working with my whole FMCSA team. I'm so excited to be here in Grapevine, Texas, to participate in the next couple of days of the ITS America convening, and it's nice to reconnect with many of you over the next few days. I hope to do just that. I'm joined by some fantastic DOT colleagues here, Dr. Robert Hampshire and Morteza Farjian, who we'll hear from in just a bit. And many of you, I think, were here yesterday to hear from FMCSA Deputy Administrator Earl Adams. I am sure you will all be here to hear our Deputy Secretary, who will speak tomorrow. Polly Trottenberg will be here. There are numerous DOT staff members. Please use this time to connect. We're here because we believe that technology and digital infrastructure are tools that should be harnessed to reach our Department of Transportation goals, our goals of safety, economic strength, climate, equity, transformation. And we're here because we share so much in common, that our work sits at the intersection of these goals, and that the work of technology can and should speed our achievements in these areas, safety chief among them. And from where I sit at FMCSA, the Venn diagram, those overlapping circles, very strong, and perhaps strongest in the overlap of safety, economic strength, but all of those goals are represented. Our mission is to reduce crashes, injuries, and fatalities involving large trucks and buses. ITS America, we talk a lot about technology, but today I'm going to start with the person. Because at the root of our industry, the commercial motor vehicle industry, is the driver. And I want to show you how technology and digital infrastructure are wraparound features that helps the safety, well-being, and success of the driver. The driver who delivers about 75% of the goods in our country and is, no doubt, an essential worker in our nation's supply chain. So let's start by learning about some incredible drivers that I and Secretary Buttigieg have had the opportunity to connect with. And I'll start here. This is Lola. Lola drives for Nussbaum Transportation out of Illinois. She's on her second career, and she drives to see the country. During the pandemic, Lola drove with her granddaughter, who did online kindergarten on the road. Secretary Buttigieg rode along with Lola, and he often tells her story. And when Lola slid off the road in an ice storm, Secretary Buttigieg actually called her personally to make sure that she was okay. Lola and Secretary Buttigieg did a pre-trip inspection prior to the ride-along. She checked tires and brakes and other safety equipment before she hit the road with the Secretary, which I was glad for, because, it's a little nerve-wracking to put your boss in a truck and say, this is Lola, go for a drive, but it went great. When Lola stops for an inspection, every time, she's greeted by a roadside safety inspector who's responsible for evaluating compliance with critical safety requirements. At weigh stations, where FMCSA state enforcement agency partners are conducting inspections, she benefits from smart infrared inspection systems and thermal imaging that can identify underinflated tires and inoperative brakes. She might benefit from mobile electronic screening systems that allow inspectors in 46 states to collect and process information in real time, even before the truck arrives at the inspection site. There's also exciting research that we're completing now in cooperation with states and motor carrier partners that would allow vehicles to complete an inspection at highway speeds and without the need to ever pull into an inspection site. This is called Level 8 inspection and can greatly expand by orders of magnitude the number of inspections that could be completed each year. And perhaps the most interesting thing about Level 8 is that it saves time, yes. It saves fuel, yes. But ultimately, it reduces emissions. So here, that Venn diagram, very strong. This is digital infrastructure for the benefit of safety, economic strength, and climate. Yep, it's working, great. This is Carmen Anderson. She typically drives meat from Wisconsin to the East Coast, which is what I did with her when I rode along for a few deliveries. We loaded up in Carmen's new truck, which has space for her 2 hairless dogs, which were actually they were very cute. They were cute. So when Carmen stopped, she showed me how to use the electronic logging device that automatically records her driving time to ensure she's compliant with the hours of service regulations. Regulations that are the cornerstone of safe driving and made easier to comply with using digital infrastructure. Another safety technology integrated into her ELD, electronic logging device, provides Carmen real-time in-cab warnings about congestion at work zones. It gives her ample time to slow down. And last week, hopefully you all participated, it was National Work Zone Awareness Week, or Go Orange Week. We lose far too many lives in work zones, and this is one way technology is helping. This is an example of technology that's funded by FMCSA's High Priority Innovative Technology Deployment Grants. Funding in this program was doubled with the bipartisan infrastructure law. On the way to a second stop, Carmen showed me the advanced driving assistance features of her new truck, ADAS. We all know this acronym. I experienced firsthand lane departure warnings, merge warnings, and notifications when the four-wheelers, who knows what a four-wheeler is? It's a passenger vehicle, when the four-wheelers were too close. Luckily, we did not have to test AEB, or automatic emergency braking, but it was there if we needed it. These are life-saving technologies. We, FMCSA, we validated the safety of these technologies through our research. FMCSA is working really closely with NHTSA right now on a rulemaking that would make AEB, just one kind of ADAS, a requirement in all trucks above 10,000 pounds. Just one more note about the time with Carmen. We arrived at our second destination only to be held in what's called detention time. This is usually unpaid. If it's paid, it's very small. Unpaid time that drivers have to wait to unload their goods. And it's not paid. And it does lead to safety outcomes because a driver may need to hurry to their next delivery. So through the bipartisan infrastructure law, again, we have some directives and tools. We're undertaking both compensation and detention time studies. One last note, we were allowed to use the restroom, Carmen and I, but it's not always the case that drivers can use the restroom at their destination. And this just brings me back to really the most human side of transportation. This is Kelly Lynn McLaughlin. Kelly is a long-haul or over-the-road driver, and she's a trainer for Schneider National. Kelly showed me another piece of technology that drivers use to stay safe. Kelly Lynn installed a camera-based mirror system which removes the blind spots from her 53-foot trailer. Cameras are mounted in the cab, and you can see in the picture, I think we put a little circle in there for you so you could see, just next to the rearview mirror. And drivers are increasingly adding these to their trucks for additional safety benefits. In that last picture, I wasn't actually driving, I was just sitting there, but I actually did drive. I've driven a few times. And I drove the course at the National Truck Driving Championship, which if anyone's ever been there, they put out obstacles that you and your trailer need to drive around, and there are rubber duckies that you have to avoid. I see some nodding. I think some people have actually seen this or done this. So I drove that closed course, no digital mirrors, only regular mirrors, and may have rendered the recording in the cab inoperable because I said some words that I wasn't supposed to as I ran over a rubber ducky because I could not see. There are blind spots that are critical to remove, and this is another way that technology helps safety for drivers. Lastly, this is Dale Brenneman. He's been a feeder driver at UPS for 24 years. We met Dale while visiting the UPS facility in Louisville, Kentucky. He showed us the app he uses to locate truck parking while he's on the go along his route. This is a top concern for truckers on the road, the lack of truck parking or the lack of safe or well-lit or truck parking with amenities. Drivers like Lola, Carmen, Kelly Lynn, and Dale, they all worry about this every time they hit the road. Drivers need rest to stay safe. This is a great example of government and public sector sharing digital information to make parking easier to find for drivers. And again, thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law, we have more resources than ever to issue grants to expand this type of technology. And again, it's FMCSA's High Priority Innovative Technology Deployment Grants Program that will do this. And we've seen several deployments that have been successful to make finding parking easier. In Connecticut, Washington, Indiana, Kentucky, and Montana. And this image here from Michigan, this is dynamic messaging showing the availability of truck parking spaces. We do this work together with the Federal Highway Administration, and we do it because we know that this is going to save lives. From the bed we sleep in, the clothes we wear, that mobile device you're probably checking every 5 seconds out there is probably delivered by a truck. Trucks operate in rural, suburban, and urban America, really in every kind of environment. The intersection is the most complex, with the most interaction with people walking, biking, and rolling. The National Roadway Safety Strategy uses data to assemble strategies that we will undertake. The number of pedestrians and bicyclists killed on our roadways, it's persistently high. Every time we release numbers, it's heartbreaking. The numbers are going up still. And that includes interactions between commercial motor vehicles, pedestrians, bicyclists, people rolling, the most vulnerable of our roadway users. So I am thrilled to announce today that the Department of Transportation is launching, I think as we speak, an intersection safety challenge. Oh good, it's up there. I want to recognize Dr. Robert Hampshire for having this idea and bringing it to fruition. You'll hear from him in just a little bit. And I also want to recognize colleagues at FHWA, FTA, and NHTSA who are participating under Robert and his team's leadership, along with FMCSA. It's an exciting new national competition and a chance for innovators to win prize money by developing technologies that can save the lives of vulnerable road users by reducing crashes at intersections. This is another way DOT is showing our commitment to reducing the number of lives lost on our roadways, specifically for vulnerable roadway users, and keeping the US DOT's innovation principles as our guiding force. Today, we're calling on industry, innovators, academia, and others to unleash innovation to solve safety problems at intersections. The challenge, your challenge now, is to develop innovative intersection safety solutions that are safe, effective, and affordable enough to allow deployment at scale across the nation. The challenge complements numerous other efforts by the entire Department of Transportation to improve roadway safety and to improve intersection safety. We hope you'll visit the US DOT booth in the exhibit hall and scan the QR code shown on the screen to learn more about the opportunity. I want to thank ITS America for this invitation and being able to launch this important challenge here with you today. And I want to close out now by inviting you all to see the work of digital infrastructure in the most human light possible. And I'll close today with an invitation to join the Department of Transportation's National Roadway Safety Strategy Call to Action. And again, thank you to Laura Chase for teeing this up so perfectly for me. The crisis on our nation's roadways, it's only solvable. I believe it is solvable, but it's only solvable if we work together. So I'm going to ask you in this room today, just as Laura did, what more can you do? Thank you so much for having me here today. It's been such a pleasure. And I now turn it back to our hosts. Thank you so much.
Please welcome back to the stage Laura Chase.
Thank you. Thank you to Administrator Hutchinson. I know everyone has piqued interest about the Intersection Safety Challenge, and we're going to invite Dr. Robert Hampshire up in a little bit to talk about that. But first, we have a panel that is going to talk about digital infrastructure and the future of mobility. So we've talked about this a lot. If you were here yesterday, we had a great workshop on digital infrastructure. How do we update legacy systems for the future? How do we actually use all of the data and digital tools that we know can not only save lives, but can help us create more sustainable mobility, can help us create more equitable mobility for communities? How do we actually use all of that data and all those tools? We are going to talk today, our panel is going to talk today about just that. And I'm pleased to introduce our moderator of the panel, who is someone who's very familiar to our entire community, Amy Ford. She's the Global Lead of Innovation at AECOM. As many of you know, Amy has had quite a unique experience in her career, which sets her up very nicely for moderating this discussion. She's worked as a deployer in a state. She has worked at the national level at ITS America. And now she works in the private sector at AECOM. So she's really seen all sides of the equation of how do you actually deploy technology in a way to get the most out of our current infrastructure assets. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Amy to the stage. Thank you.
There we are. I'll step away from that mic, so since I'm on this mic, but thank you guys for coming. We really appreciate. We're going to have a really interesting conversation. And as you know, panels are one of those things that can either excite you or make you turn to your phone and start scrolling your LinkedIn and seeing what people are posting about you on this site. So as we get going and as we invite our panelists out, I want to set the stage a little bit for digital. Digital is one of these interesting topics that I want you to think about, and we're not doing Q&A from the audience today, which I regret, because I'd love to engage you, but I want you to think about this. Is our discussion about digital infrastructure new? Is it retreading space that we've already been in? Is it a combination of the two? And if so, if we have a mandate to start thinking about digital infrastructure and thinking about what we want to deliver, what is it that we collectively can do to ensure that we have an urgency and a process to what happens here? That's what we're going to invite our panel to sit and talk about, and I'm going to invite them to the stage. But I don't know about you, but I was personally incredibly excited by the drum line that came in. It always gives me chills, adds the excitement. So how about this as we get going? I wanted to invite our panelists to come on. We are joined by Mike Williams with Texas DOT. We are joined by Michael, who is the director of NCT COG, the North Central Texas Council of Governments. We have Manali Shah. If you can bring them on with our own drum line. So here we go. Digital infrastructure. Here we go. This is our own drum line. All right. And I also am happy to have Manali Shah with Google, and as well as Missy Sevi with FedEx joining us today. But folks, I think that as we get going, and we're not going to be talking about bios, but what we are going to be talking about as we introduce ourselves and we introduce this discussion is, why would you agree to sit on this stage and talk about digital infrastructure? That's the question. Why this panel, other than the fact that it's a plenary session and that's exciting, do we get to talk to all of you and that kind of thing? But why would you agree to sit here? And Michael, maybe I'll start with you and just sort of ask you that question. If you could, as you do that, introduce yourself and explain sort of who you are and what you're about. But why would you agree to sit here as we're sitting and talking today?
Well, thank you very much. And
we'll get his mic up.
thanks for having me today. Can you hear me?
Not yet. Mark, you want to hand him your mic and see if your mic can give him some sound?
This is the partnership between
go.
the Metropolitan Planning Organization and the Texas Department of Transportation. So my name is Michael Morris. I'm the Transportation Director for the Metropolitan Planning Organization here in Dallas-Fort Worth. I am here because of two things. Laura introduced ITS America's focus on safety, and she focused on being smarter. And if you read that, ITS is focused on equity. A rising tide raises all ships. So I think we need technology for all of our neighborhoods, not just those that are more glamorous to some of you. And then I believe we're at a crossroads with regard to technology. I'm not asking you to agree with me on that, but I think we need more use cases to demonstrate to our traveling public and our public officials tremendous benefits associated with use cases that technology can bring us. I think they're in the area of data, and hopefully we can get into those particular questions. You're home to dynamically priced managed lanes. I think managed lanes are the future of a whole host of technologies, including guaranteed transit and autonomous trucks at night. Safety. Mark has blessed me with being a member of the Safety Task Force for TxDOT. I wake up every day bringing technology to the forefront. My smartphone knows how fast it's going, and I believe it knows when it's going in the wrong direction, and I think my smartphone should call me if I'm a wrong way driver. The fourth element is freeway mobility as a service, not just transit mobility as a service. I hope to be able to get into what freeway mobility as a service would mean. And then we have sent to Washington equal access to the internet is a transportation mode. Elimination of food deserts, and a whole host of other things. So I am here because I believe we're at a crossroads. First of all, thank you for coming to the Dallas-Fort Worth region. But the Dallas-Fort Worth region would love to be, we're a great partner with TxDOT, but would love to be a partner with you in expediting and speeding up use cases when it comes to the safety and other strategies. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Mark, let's see your first works.
Okay, we'll test. All right, we got it going. Thank you. Mark Williams, Executive Director with the Texas Department of Transportation. And I'm here, like Michael, for a couple of reasons. First of all, Laura told me I had to, so that's why I'm here. But secondly, and is really and why we were so excited to have ITS America here in Texas and here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex region is really just the opportunity that provides for us to show many of the exciting things that are going on with intelligent and smart and innovative transportation solutions, not only around the state, but here in the Metroplex region in particular. And I think we're going to have an opportunity to touch on some of those throughout our discussion here today. And you're going to be able to see, if you haven't already seen, a number of different panel discussions, technical tours, helping to highlight just a lot of the really cool and exciting things that are going on. And bottom line for me is when we're talking about deployment and innovation, there's two things in that for us. Safety, we've talked about that safety component. There's the mobility component as well, obviously. I mean, it is transportation. Transportation is not transportation without mobility in there. And you put those two together, and that leads to the opportunities. It leads to economic opportunities. It leads to collaborations. And that's really what this conference is about. That's what I hope this plenary session, this opening session, can kind of help set the stage for, and really excited to be part of it.
Thanks, Mark. Monali.
Well, I have to say, this is the first time I have been on a panel where all the panelists' names start with the letter M.
All right.
So-
Very
M&A.
nice.
So I think that's why I
M&A.
got invited. 'Cause you're the moderator.
There
so
we
you still
go.
get
I
an
get to
M,
be the M
right?
of the moderator.
So yeah, to me, it's really exciting to be here. And when I think about my journey and I reflect on what's important to me, it's really giving people the ability to breathe clean air, move safely, to learn, earn, feed our bodies and our souls with the things that we need. And when we think about visions like this, we don't think, well, only if you are in zip code 60603, you get those things. But if you're in 60616, you don't get those things. And the reality is that is the way things are today, right? It depends on where you live, what you get access to. And I think we really now have this opportunity to think about how do we shape the way we address these challenges and leverage all these new technologies to close these gaps. And so for me, it's really like looking at how do we take this intention we have, the investments that are coming in and these announcements that are being made, the innovation that's a part of this whole community, and start implementing. And so it's really, I love the theme of implementing innovation because I think there's so much already here, and it's, okay, now let's start accelerating that pace of innovation so we can realize these goals that we all collectively work on. So that's what inspires me.
All right, Missy, you get to close us out with something awesome.
Hi there, I'm Missy Zeffi. I'm a regulatory attorney at FedEx, and I'm from Pittsburgh, and I did not know that the Dallas Cowboys had a drum line, and I feel like I need to go back to Pittsburgh and make a recommendation because there's nothing quite like a drum line. I'm excited to be here. I had a wave of thoughts about digital infrastructure that came through my mind when I was asked. Certainly at FedEx, we're always looking to be safer, more efficient, and better serve our customers. And as a regulatory attorney, I follow the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration and Administrator Hutchinson very closely. And a lot of what the FMCSA is working on right now requires advancements in our digital infrastructure. So I've been following that. But also, just, as a citizen and as a person who lives in Pittsburgh, the city of bridges, I also understand the importance of our basic infrastructure and making sure the public understands the importance of our digital infrastructure as well. I think we all know we don't want a bridge to collapse when we're driving over it, but does everyone understand the safety and the opportunities and the value of investing in and advancing our digital infrastructure? So those are some of the reasons I
think
wanted
that's
to
a
be
great
here.
way to start this. And let me do this. I told the audience that I wanted to get into the topic of digital infrastructure and the definition of it just by asking us, hey, are we retreading stuff we've already been doing? Is this just a fancy new name to put over the work that we've already gone? But I would posit that when we talk about digital infrastructure, and I guess maybe let's definition set here, that it could be framed in three ways. The first area of digital infrastructure, as I see it, is around big picture. It's about the policy. It's about the reference of the architecture of it. It's about policy setting in a digital mode. It's that engagement of the standards and what we're doing and what we're saying, and that being a big portion of what we could be with digital infrastructure. The second is as much about the data infrastructure. The data, the engagement, the data governance, the tool, the capacity, the platforms that we have to ingest this data, to clean the data, to understand it, so that we can create APIs and digital layers off of the top of that. And the third is the one I think that we're all most familiar with and most comfortable with. It's that operations digital layer, right? It's the layers that we see in our traffic management centers. It's the layers that we get when we have our devices that are out in the field that are pulling software in, and how we manage then our roadways and our congestion and our incident response and such. So as we see those three, and as we sit and we think about those, and they're overlapping from a definitional perspective, let me ask you this. What do you see as sort of the benefits and the drawbacks and the gaps right now of what we're missing in a digital infrastructure section? So if you were to take those three areas, do we have it figured out? Do we know what we're doing in a policy setting and environment and standards to our data platforms and to our operational layers of infrastructure? What do we say? Michael?
I think it's a great question. I think we're in the Middle Ages with regard to this particular subject. I think it's more than just those three, and I think we have to jump into the deep end because we're never going to figure it out until we do. So if we can start advancing like we're trying to do, we have an application in Washington, partnering with TxDOT, partnering with other states in a joint national protocol, Texas, Florida, California, MPOs, to just jump in the deep end and go to a cloud-based software system. May cost us $30 or $40 million. I think it's a digital bank. I think it's a financial mechanism, and as well as probably the fourth element to that might be a financial bank. And the whole fidelity of data, we can't begin to fully comprehend. When you look at a vehicle that may have hundreds of sensors and hundreds of sensors being sent to us, how much of that do you save? What is the unit of measure do you save? You can't save everything from every vehicle constantly. You're going to make mistakes. You can't store everything. But I think the best and the brightest, if you just jump in the deep end, and if we could get 50 million applications doing something different with regard to developing cloud-based infrastructure, data infrastructure, getting it from the vehicles, getting it from the infrastructure, start connecting clouds to other clouds, so OEM clouds can communicate directly to one cloud, for example, in the DFW region or the DFW region in Texas, whether that manufacturer doesn't have to communicate to 412 different clouds. The more seamless these transactions, look at how seamless the banking industry is today.
Right.
You can write down a series of 7 or 9 numbers, and you can route money anywhere over the world instantly.
So you'd argue that it's time for us to move into the Renaissance period, this period of enlightenment, and sort of where we go with that.
Yeah,
and
we all throw risk out the window. We jump in the deep end. We'll figure it out as we get there. And if we share that information on good, positive, and negative findings, I think it can get back to this theme. We can expedite to the chase as part of that particular process.
Yeah,
So
and every time you said cloud, our Google representative went, yeah, cloud. But it's not just about that from a commercial perspective. You know, as Google sits and sees this, and you think about the 3 areas, do you think what Michael's talking about is missing? Do you agree? Are we in the Middle Ages in regards to sort of our capacity to really weave that story together?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think in so many other areas of our life, we see things moving so quickly, right? And from the consumer experience side, right? I mean, if we think about the way we move, the types of ways that we access information, one of the things that I think that we sometimes lose sight of is simplicity, you know, and just we get caught up in all these details, right, of, you know, the technology, but the power of the technology is really to simplify experiences. And so when we think about things like Google Maps or, you know, Waze or any of these types of tools that exist now that we rely on, it's creating an experience for a user with simplicity. And so I think that's a principle that we can bring not only for the travelers, but also for the people who are operating all the infrastructure, the mobility services, the people who need to make decisions in these very complex environments, right, where there's dynamics that are changing all the time about the physical world, what's happening, you know, there's things like flooding and all kinds of different dynamics that are happening. And then there's different ways that people are using mobility services and modes of transportation and moving about the world in different ways. And there's information about that. And so those are those foundational level layers, right? The infrastructure, that's the physical world, creating a digital layer of that, which is maps. Then there's all the activity data around what's happening. So there's those foundational layers, but I think the top layer is really focused on the users and thinking about how do we surface that information up in a way that is really simple and easy for people to understand and make decisions on. And I think that's right now I feel a big opportunity for us. We have so much of the data, so much of the, those underlying kind of technologies, but we still have a hard time making it simple for people to understand what's happening and make a relevant decision quickly. And as things change and, there's kind of more coming at people who are making these types of decisions, we really need to simplify that experience so they can take the action. They can use their expertise to really focus on the decisions they need to make versus all the wrangling that has to take place.
Right, Missy, yeah.
Yeah, especially when what Mike was speaking about, and then also with Manali, like what occurs to me then is just like data deluge and the governance piece that Amy mentioned, and the challenge of having so much data coming in from so many places, and how do you pick apart what's useful and what's insightful, and then use it, measure it, and make sure you're implementing it in a way that's effective. You know what your goals are. You're measuring after to make sure, if you're trying to make an intersection safer, is the intersection safer after implementation? And I guess my head starts to spin with all the questions around data, how much of it there is, and how to make use of it.
And I know that all of us would probably love to do a deep dive into FedEx's back-end systems that actually manage the operations of your fleet on our roadways, which is so sophisticated when we think about what we even do in our management of our operations, sort of at a DOT level or otherwise. But maybe that's a conversation for another day. We'll get you to all sign NDAs when we get into that. But Mark, I wanted to follow up on that and the simplistic side and sort of the data and the deluge of that. I know that when I was at the DOT, for instance, we were doing a data inventory, and we finally stopped counting around 1,500 to 2,000 different data sets and systems that we could pull into our data platforms, and whether it was on someone's Excel spreadsheet on their desk or whether it was in a sophisticated system. But from your perspective and looking at that on a data side and a DOT side, do you see gaps in what you're trying to accomplish if, let's say, we saw these three areas of data governance and data environments and digital policy?
Certainly there are gaps. And, Michael described us as being in the Middle Ages. I would maybe say that, the glass is half full, and we have definitely seen progress in those areas. You mentioned, Amy, the policy, the data, and the operation. So on the policy side, I think that's one of the areas that we've been leading in here in Texas. We have passed enabling legislation, 4 different sets of enabling legislation that have allowed for the operation of autonomous and innovative transportation systems in the state of Texas, and to do it in a way that's attractive to industry to come and develop their systems here in the state of Texas. And so from a policy standpoint, we really have to continue to be focused on enabling without over-regulating and over-restricting, and that continues to be a focus that we have here. The data side, yes, we've got a lot of opportunity, a lot of challenges in that area. We're very big on data with TxDOT. Early on, we started making large purchases of safety data. When we have a use case, when our MPOs are coming to us and our cities are saying, hey, we want this data, right, we want to utilize this data, we go out and get it. And we've purchased huge amounts of data on the transportation and speed data. We've expanded to that to telematic purchases. That when we purchase it, we make it available to everybody doing business with Texas and within the state of Texas to use and innovate with. And it's kind of putting it out there and letting people begin to work with it, because that's where we start to find these solutions on how to manage it. We've got a lot of opportunities out there, a lot of challenges on how we get through it all and how that we make sure that it's working for us, but we're getting there. And then that leads to the operational side of that. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing that in action as we're seeing, real deployments of ITS systems. We're seeing, I've mentioned previously that Lancaster, Texas, here in the Metroplex area, is the center of the universe when it comes to testing commercial automated trucks.
Right.
And they're operating vehicles for Fortune 500 companies. We got 4 different companies. We've got more automated trucking companies in Lancaster, Texas, than they have donut shops. Right. So, that shows that it is working. we're filling the glass up, we're taking positive steps to achieve that implementation. And we just have to continue that same model, that same template that has got us here to follow up the rest of the way.
Well, and I think you framed that well. I mean, the theme of the conference is implementing innovation, and the implementation phase of this is always the rub. And we could get into conversations about procurement and issues and how do we do it and work with our offices of information technology. You can talk about the freedom of the private sector to innovate and do what they need to do in that. But I want to take us back just really quickly. I think that when we talk definitions and we talk about digital infrastructure, right now a lot of the conversation happening is at this policy level. And the idea that we need a digital infrastructure that matches the capacity of what our physical infrastructure is. And so when we say that from a digital infrastructure, we're talking about rules of the road, the capacity to digitally communicate with those automated trucks as they're driving on our roadways, the ability to harness the information that could come from our connected vehicles and in and out, and the policy setting and the regulatory environment also that sort of dictates the exchange, the awareness building on our roadways and that kind of thing. So as you sit and you see, and there's some urgency right now, and Dr. Hampshire will talk about this from a digital infrastructure, what is the role of government, public agencies, and others to help define collaboratively that digital infrastructure? Should it be something, going back to our olden days in ITS, you guys, when we created an ITS reference architecture, right, 30 years ago, it set the stage for us and what we did in an ITS environment. Do we need a digital infrastructure reference architecture? Do we need that to impart those digital rules? Do we need that kind of environment? So Texas and Austin isn't doing it differently than Denver and in Colorado, or is doing it differently than in Chicago or elsewhere, or in Memphis. I don't know if you're in Memphis or not, but so what do we think? Is that a necessary role and piece?
If you go back to, I think Mark did a very nice job of explaining the environment in Texas and the ability of industry to come to Texas, all kinds, and the ability for them to just move out and get early applications of those particular items. But if you go back to your question, are we ready to move ahead on an exact format? Mm-hmm. I ask you, do you really think we know enough about all of the outcomes we're going to discover to know exactly what the format should be? I think the answer is no. Mm-hmm. I think we need to go advance more these use cases with regard to what's going to back to this use case. My cell phone, when I'm driving, can tell me exactly how fast it's going. My cell phone has a GPS system on it. The number one public policy issue in Texas, in our region, and I think it's cropped into your commission, is wrong way driving. Our elected officials can't stand it. Mm-hmm. It is horrible, the innocent lives that are lost in wrong way driving. Why can't we solve that particular problem by that cell phone telling me I'm now going the wrong way on that freeway system?
So pick discrete use cases.
Discrete use cases,
sort of
and then build the data infrastructure around those particular use cases, and then start aggregating those use cases up into a digital bank.
Rather than an aggregation.
Instead of a top-down aggregation to that process. This way you get earlier implementation. I agree with you. I think there's contractual procedures that make it hard to advance this. Some break in federal procurement to throw some of those rules away to advance would be helpful. But I would rather see us aggregate hundreds of really cool use cases into a digital bank as we all learn how to move forward.
What do we think?
Yeah, I would just want to also then remain cognizant of the potential for a patchwork to develop. You know, if you have a fleet moving from Texas into Arizona, do the rules change? Do the guidelines change? Does the app still work? Certainly something that an interstate carrier would always want to keep in mind.
That is, you know, the interesting part of the interstate when it was created. It was a vision of no stoplights. We heard this yesterday in a session. No stoplights, one corridor, whether it's I-80, I-10, I-70, take your pick, that you could be able to cross the country. And it's a very clear vision and standard about what that was. And it was standardized. Standardized roads, standardized lanes, standardized expectations, standardized exits, et cetera. Do we need that standard? What do you think, Mark and Manali? Would you add to that?
Well, you know, I think I understand the issues with standardization.
Right.
You know, Years ago, it was VHS or Betamax. What are we now? Neither. So we need to be careful on standardization and not have too much of a, when we're talking about a regulatory standpoint, I think we're still at the stage where we need to be focused on enabling as opposed to over-regulating and setting rules. And because I think we're going to stifle the ongoing innovation that we have right now in the industry. But I do agree that we have to be aware of, as we begin to congeal around certain standards that people are using, that we have to be able to serve industry. I mean, ultimately, that's what we're here to do, is to serve the customers and serve industry. And we have to enable that framework that accomplishes that, but we have to do it in a way that doesn't stifle that innovation with over-regulatory burdens.
Right.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just add on that. If we think about just the way technology and software development, all of that has evolved, we've really gone from, a past where it was like this monolith to now, just all these modular approaches where development happens very rapidly. And so if we kind of apply that to this whole area, and to Mark's point, you have to kind of allow for the innovation. And where I think some of the standardization helps is when you want to help kind of accelerate things. Or, I would almost say like what we need to do is showcase and document and share more of the stuff that has been effective so people can deploy it faster, but not just kind of wait to try for all these standards before we start to deploy things. And I mean, we're speaking very broadly because there's a lot of different things we could be talking about here when we talk about digital infrastructure. But the way that I think about it is really like taking these modular approaches, looking at what are you trying to solve and what do you need to solve, and then start deploying it. And when you see that happening, I mean, that's how it's happened in many other industries, right? That's why we see the pace of innovation happen so quickly in other spaces. And so I think it's just that bringing that kind of mindset to this space where, I think traditionally standards have been such a part of it because you are doing things that are physical infrastructure. But on the digital infrastructure side, things can evolve much more rapidly. And I think that's almost like a mindset shift that we need to make in this space.
I think you just brought up a great point about the layers that we see on our infrastructure, our physical infrastructure and the standards that we have there, the mobility services that sit on top of that, and the continued emphasis that we have on equity and accessibility and congestion relief and sustainability, and then that digital layer. And we know that digital layer is not just imparting rules and standards that allow us to figure out how to use that infrastructure. It also can engage and impart the goals that we want to accomplish: safety goals, equity goals, greenhouse gas emissions goals, and others as we weave that together. And I think that we all know that we're seeing pockets of this happen. The mobility data specifications that are moving, that we have in our cities about governing how our scooters and other light mobility is some of you using, and the data sharing environments there. How we're looking at work zone data exchange and the WZDX, if folks are following on that. How do we systemize how we talk about construction on our roads, which is shockingly diverse depending on which contractor is faxing, and I'm not exaggerating, faxing you in their road closure report for that week and telling you what they're doing on our roadways. So how we engage at that at the digital layer, I think, is an important piece, and I think we're going to continue to see more movement as we pull together those modules of this. Let me ask then the implementation question. If you were to say what was the most effective investment that you have made in a digital infrastructure to date, and whether it's on the policy side, to the data systems, to the operations side of digital, what would you guys say it's been so far? And what have been the outcomes attached to this? And from a regulatory perspective, feel free to sort of espouse on that side of it from an investment side. But what would you say? And maybe, Mark, I'll ask you first.
Well, I touched on it earlier, and that was the investment that we have made and continue to make in data. And making, as we understand there to be use cases for that data and opportunity, we don't hesitate to go out and get it and to make that available. And that in turn enables our partners with the MPOs, the COG here, our partners that sit with cities, the consultants and other industry partners that work with us to take that information and turn it around and really utilize it in ways that if we hadn't gone out and done that, or if we had just held it to ourselves, we wouldn't be achieving right now.
Right.
And to me, that has been and will continue to be the most important investment. But we've got to, as Michael talked about, we've got to continue to now invest in ways to better utilize it, to parse through it, because it's beginning to get to the point where, humans aren't able to manage that effectively, and we've got to be investing in management tools, machine learning, artificial intelligence to really help us maximize that data inventory that we already have and that we're building on.
Yeah.
Let me reinforce something Mark just said, because TxDOT was a leader in initial data purchases. It's created opportunity. The CRIS data set, the INRIX data sets. Regions are now creating speed thermal maps every 15 minutes for a whole month. If you go back to graduate school, it's not the arithmetic mean that's important, it's the standard deviation that's important. We're now calculating the standard deviation on critical roadway segments with regard to, is this a roadway that really needs to be reconstructed, or does this need some sort of ITS freeway management system?
Right.
The human can now visualize this speed thermal map over the course of a month because of the data that Mark has given us. What has that done? It's led to this national interest, Tom Bomani in our region and others, of inventorying all the construction location sites in order to help autonomous truck companies back to a national protocol with regard to goods movement. I think you bring up a good point. Now we got hundreds of people working on these national construction sites with regard to it. If Mark had never taken the leadership at TxDOT to do this, you would never have been there. What are we ready to submit? We're ready to submit in June a $200 million effort to unlock the efficiency of ports. So just because you have these use cases doesn't mean they're not nationally systematic.
Right.
So what we're doing at a port at the intermodal, Burlington Northern Santa Fe Intermodal, all the data that's available on that train with regard to cargo containers and all the information that truck companies need with regard to that cargo container they're trying to get, instead of this independent decision where a train is unloaded and then the truck comes and the truck's load is always the one on the bottom and he has to wait half a day and emit heavy-duty diesel emissions till his container is available. The train can be unloaded with the information that the truck company needs with regard to efficiently loading both simultaneously. Mm-hmm. That is a data integration, ubiquitous information system that can break the code nationally at the Port of Houston or any other port.
Right.
So it's a national demonstration across the whole item.
And that would have never it's all bigger in Texas.
That would have never happened if Mark didn't go out and start creating the data-driven process for
I appreciate that. So if you're listening to the crowd, standard deviation analytics, and if you've got data cell, talk to TxDOT. But as we keep going, but other investments that you guys have seen as we go. But I completely agree with you, Michael. I think that the scale and the performative part of this, the demonstrations of what we do, is critical to unlocking it, showing how it really works. But Mamali and Missy,
yeah, I guess it's probably not surprising that I'm going to say AI and machine learning and build on what Mark was saying as well. These are one of these transformative technologies. My son is actually, I have a 16-year-old son who's doing a paper this week for English about AI, and it's been very interesting to talk to him and kind of get his perspectives on the potential of it, but then also the risks and the things that we have to be careful about. But as I was talking to him, I was sharing with him, just the power of things that can be understood about the world in a way that we haven't been able to. And some of the examples we were talking about, one is things like taking satellite imagery, photos from drones, all these things where you can get all this imagery. And I said, imagine if people had to look at all of this and detect changes and look at things like erosion or, what's the change in the environment. If people had to look at all these images, right, it would take forever and you'd never things would change by the time you were going to make a decision. So we have, machine learning models that can detect conditions about what's happening in the world through, using video, using images, and detect and understand what's happening in the world. We also have ways to surface up information and make it easier for people to make decisions, right? And so, the simple example is things like search, right? Where you type in words and you get all of this information back that's powered by AI. But, as we work in this realm, some other just very practical examples, we've worked with the Hawaii Department of Transportation, and they've been, they have lots of great data, just like you all said, but they said, we have a hard time, getting a clear view of what's happening. We have lots of data, but so what we are helping them do is take all this great data they have, augment where they need, but then surface the information up and look for patterns. So safety, we take safety for example. They've had high rates of pedestrian fatalities due to excessive speeding. And so they said, hey, we want to better understand where this is happening, where are the locations, let's detect where these patterns are. And we know things that are effective. We know effective countermeasures that worked in this one place. Let's be proactive and identify these patterns and implement these statewide. So they're very practical things where you can use these kinds of techniques like AI and machine learning and analytics to identify these patterns and then accelerate something that you already know works. So I think the opportunity to leverage this technology, and really that's been what our focus is we're really democratizing the technology. The things that Google has used to build its own products and services is now available for others to tap into and use. So it's really just a matter of looking at where do we want to aim this? Where do we want to accelerate something that would be helpful so that we can implement these actions?
Yeah. Well, as we talk about FedEx, and let me pivot just really quickly as we wrap ourselves up here in the last few minutes, when we talk about, and as we have our federal government partners coming on board, and we think about investments, and we think about strategy, about operations, our improvement in safety, how we address air quality issues and that kind of thing, but from a FedEx perspective, what could federal governments and others do that would help operators like you meet your societal, your economic goals and needs as you look at all of this?
Yeah, certainly providing framework guidelines so that we can avoid a patchwork, and other state DOTs have guidance so that we continue to develop our digital infrastructure, but in a way that doesn't hamper our ability to move goods from state to state.
And when you say guidelines, let me probe on that really quickly. What would that mean? Would that mean standardized guidelines that transmit operations like speed information, takes the method of handling uniform traffic devices, MUTCD, and it pushes it through so that your vehicles are seeing that and that information on construction, or what do you think when you see data sharing that you all would share back with DOTs? How do you look at that?
Well, I think that's
and not to put you on the spot.
But I think,
and no one record this and hold her accountable for what she's about to say.
But I do think that information sharing is a challenge, and I think it's a challenge certainly from the DOT's perspective, because there are pending rulemakings that have been issued, and I think that for the DOT to get the information they need to move forward, they're hoping that the private sector will come to the table with some data that they can use to further the rulemaking. And I think there can be tension there, and there's a little bit of back and forth. So I see certainly from, private companies certainly have their proprietary information, but if we want an overall digital infrastructure to advance, then there needs to be some sharing of that information. So I think that's kind of a tricky spot that we're in right now.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Manali, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know one of the things that I hear sometimes that maybe is not as clear. I think there's all this great investment coming, and often even when I talk with my colleagues from the public sector, they're like, well, we know we can spend this on the physical infrastructure, and CapEx, but how do I spend this on OpEx and invest in the digital infrastructure of my organization, and whether it's possible to do that and less known, or whether it needs to be more clearly articulated, or that funds need to be more also directed towards these kinds of digital infrastructure spending, like, I think it would help to clarify that so people either know what they can do or that more can come in that form of investment so that we can extend, you know, the impact of the investments that are possible now with the bipartisan infrastructure.
I appreciate that. And, you know, as I summarize sort of what you're saying and we think about those three buckets again, here's what I'm hearing you say. Yes, that we should have some overarching frameworks that help drive that. And right now, the ITS architectural framework is on version, 9 or something, I think, as we go. So yes, we should consider looking at that. 2, from a data perspective, how we continue to make investments and then share that data, Mark, to your point. That has unlocked so much and so much potential as we go into that. 3, how do we think about the investment of our dollars? What regulatory-wise, legislative-wise, or others? Anyone here from a DOT who might have, instead of a CIP, what is your SMART and your operations IP, improvement project list? Do we have a 10-year list on our investment strategies from a digital perspective that we equally fund as we go? I think the question back to you all as I started off this conversation is whether or not this is new. Are we talking about digital infrastructure in a way that is new, that requires an urgency of us to sit and focus? And I'd love a show of hands for people who think this is new or if this is more of the same, because I think that in that conversation, we might need to focus how we talk about it with our legislators, with our regulators, with our customers, and how we engage others and what we do from these to-do items on our investment side and our structure. So, is this a new topic, or is this something that we feel like is a continuation of where we've been? What do you think? Show of hands, you say it's new. Continuation of where we've been. There we go. The last step that we need to focus on then is how do we drive this to the consciousness level that we have the investment and the strategy and the collective will to make a difference in our transportation infrastructure. Thanks to our guests. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you to the audience. And we look forward to talking about it further.
Please welcome back to the stage Laura Chase.
All right. Well, next up, we have a special fireside chat with 2 officials from US DOT. So I'm going to introduce both of them, and then they'll join me on stage. Our first guest is someone known very well to all of you. He is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Research and Technology at US DOT and also the Chief Science Officer. Please help me welcome Dr. Robert Hampshire to the stage. And our second guest is Morteza Farajian, who leads the Build America Bureau. As you know, Build America Bureau's work is critical to advancing large-scale infrastructure projects with financing. And so we are very pleased to have them join us today for a fireside chat.
All right.
Welcome. All right, can you hear me? Okay. All right, so first and foremost, the topic on everyone's mind this morning, Robert, we are very excited to hear more about the US DOT Intersection Safety Challenge, and I wanted to see if you can tell us a little bit more about that and how you are looking at implementing digital infrastructure in your plans.
Okay, well, thank you, Laura, and actually thank the whole ITS America community, because the announcement made this morning by Administrator Hutchinson was part for this community to engage, and actually a challenge and a call to action for this community. We know that last year 43,000 people were killed in car crashes. Of those, 25% happened at intersections. That's signalized intersections, unsignalized, railroad crossings. We know that this is a major challenge in an area where we can make a big difference for safety. So Administrator Hutchinson announced the Intersection Safety Challenge, and that really is part of our national roadway safety strategy to get to 0 fatalities. And we can do that. And we can do that starting at intersections. The idea is that over many years, over the last 20 years, there's been so much technology developed for autonomous vehicles, for example, LiDAR, path planning, sensing, haptic controls, connectivity. Can we take those from the vehicle and put them at intersections to make them safer? Now, we're not pre-describing what the solutions would be, but we're challenging you with this problem. At intersections, 25% of fatalities happen. Let's get out there, rise to the call of this challenge, and looking forward to great solutions. If you go to challenge.gov, right now you'll get the information about the structure of the challenge. There's prizes. There's a prize associated with it if you're on the winning teams. And so look forward to private sector, academia, nonprofit, cities. There's no restrictions on who can apply. It's a pure challenge. I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with.
Great, and I'll just mention that USDOT has a booth here, and they have information about the Intersection Challenge at their booth. So please take a few minutes this week to stop by and learn more. Morteza. So Build America Bureau's work is critical in advancing large-scale public-private partnerships and investments, including for digital infrastructure. This is a bit of a new area, I would imagine. Can you share with the audience here today how you're leveraging loans like TIFIA, the TIFIA program, to help build partnerships and rethink how we invest in technology?
Great. Thanks, Laura. Very happy to be here today with this amazing audience. First, let me ask, who in the audience has heard about Build America Bureau? Let's see how many hands would go up. Okay, a little bit less than half. So it's interesting, and that's exactly what I expected, because as you mentioned, Laura, Build America Bureau is relatively new, about 5-6 years. But the programs that we have, the loan programs that we have, which by the way, they're subsidized loan programs, very good interest rate. If you wanted to close a loan today, 35-year, 40-year fixed rate would have been about 3.7%, with a lot of other flexibilities, such as deferring first payment up until 5 years after project completion, which gives plenty of time to implement that project, be able to generate revenue and pay back the loan. Although these loans have been around for a long time, they have been mainly used in the past for highway projects, for toll roads. Those are the areas that represented most of projects in our pipeline. But of course, there are other flexibilities, and especially with the new administration, with President Biden's and Secretary Buttigieg's emphasis on diversifying our pipeline and making sure that projects such as ITS projects can benefit from these programs. We have spent a lot of time over the last couple of months, I would say year and a half, to be able to communicate the message to this industry that you can also finance your projects through our loan programs. And we have a couple of programs that can help you to build capacity. I know that at the beginning it will be scary, because if you haven't done it in the past, if you don't know how to do it, it may look a little bit scary, but I can assure you that our doors are open. We are not like other parts of DOT that are running competitive grant programs. These loans are not competitive. We have over $100 billion in lending capacity. It's not oversubscribed. We can actually sit down with you, walk you through the process, hold your hand, and tell you how you can maximize the benefits of the loans as a partner. So it's not that wall between us and you because of a competitive grant program. We do have a couple of competitive grant programs too that we can provide to you to provide capacity. You can, especially for public entities who want to learn a little bit more about how to take advantage of these loan programs. We have one that I can announce today. The NOFO is going to go out. It's called Regional Infrastructure Accelerator Program. We have gone through 2 rounds as a pilot program, and because it has been successful, now round 3 is going to go out, $24 million. Most likely the NOFO is going to go out today. It might have already been out since we were in the backstage. Very simple process. You can apply for it, and that would allow you to hire in-house people, staff, or consultants to help you better understand how you can take advantage of financing, to leverage the money that you have and be able to implement some of the solutions years earlier and take advantage of all the benefits, and of course save money, because we all know that a good project that is shovel-worthy is going to generate values much more than the cost itself. So if you can implement it years faster, you'll be able to beat construction cost escalation and get all of those benefits much sooner. So I mentioned that one grant program. There are other grant programs There's another one that's going to go out, Innovative Finance Technical Assistance Program, that's going to be $40 million. And we have a couple of other tools that I can't cover all of them in the short, limited time that we have today. But if you go to our website, you'll be able to get information about every single one of them. And if you don't understand some parts of it, feel free to give us a call. As I said earlier, we would love to just talk to you and walk you through the process.
Actually, can I jump in here and I want to just foot stomp a little bit and say, this is incredible news. I'm just really excited that Morteza is here on the stage with us today, because we've always talked about getting to scale in the ITS community, be it different technologies, getting to scale, getting the benefits to scale, particularly around safety. We also know the efficiency benefits and the equity benefits, but we're trying to employ all the tools that we have available, be it discretionary grants, through a guidance. But here, Morteza represents another very powerful tool for, particularly on digital infrastructure, to get to scale when it makes sense, particularly around our values on safety. So thank you, Morteza, for being here. And this is a tool for this community that I would love for you all to take advantage of, and look forward to the projects that come out of it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, when I said this morning, when I came out on stage, what is your plan to implement innovation? Being able to fund and finance it is a huge part of that. And I think it's really, I'm thankful to our USDOT partners for continuing to innovate and come up with new ways to help us scale technology. So a question to both of you. Digital infrastructure, as we've talked about, it's a new way of investing. It's really looking at investments in our transportation infrastructure in with a very different lens from how we've done things in the past. Public agencies are challenged with limited resources, limited public support and understanding of digital tools. It's hard to cut a ribbon on a technology, and a workforce that is in need of additional skills and capacity to help us innovate at scale. So how is USDOT supporting and empowering innovation in the public sector as we really are in the midst of this digital transformation?
Laura, that's a great question. Let me just lead off with an example. So last month we announced $94 million in our SMART grant program. That was a phase one. There'll be a prototyping and planning. There's a phase two coming. But in phase one, we funded 59 projects around the country. For example, in different clusters, from sensors to connectivity to smart traffic lights to curb management. So for example, in each of these clusters, the curb management, we funded maybe 10 projects around the country to really lower congestion, but really pollution related to people driving around in circles looking for parking, last mile delivery. So this curb management cluster is an example of an approach of peer learning and capacity building. So these are 9, in this case, cities around the country that are moving forward with curb management, but all the time they're interacting with each other, generating materials that other cities can learn from. And so that's one tool about capacity planning, capacity building at the local level, is that we have real projects in the ground, 59 of them, for example, that we just announced, and we'll be harvesting the learnings from that and putting it in something called the Smart Community Resource Center as a way to learn. So that's one way we're kind of thinking about it, is providing opportunities for states and cities to learn from each other to build that capacity. I know there's a lot more that needs to be done, but that's one way we're kind of thinking of working with cities on technology.
And just to add to what Robert mentioned, a lot of folks in this room are entrepreneurs, and they know about different phases in the cycle that a project from idea initiation has to go all the way to full implementation at commercial scale. The first phase is that idea that needs to be proven, proof of concept. And Smart Grant that Robert mentioned is probably one of the tools that you have, among other tools, to be able to take advantage of the seed money, be able to work on those ideas, and be able to grow them to the point that then you can come to us and say that, okay, for implementation of it to the next phase, now we need a little bit more assistance. It's not just about the technology itself. We need to think about the commercial aspects of it. We need to think about how we can generate revenue off of this concept, how we can quantify and monetize the value so actually the concept can be now deployed to a commercial scale. And that's where some of our programs can help you. The 2 technical assistance programs, the grants that I mentioned earlier, would allow you to hire skill sets or develop those skill sets within your organization now to be able to take this technology to the next phase. And then the loan programs that we have is going to give you the tool that you need in terms of having access to resources to be able to get to that point. Don't get me wrong. Getting that loan is not that easy. I don't want to make it sound that it's too easy. But what I want you to know after you leave this meeting is that we are your advocates. We are your partner. We're not trying to negotiate the loan in a way that we get the best deal out of that loan. We're actually trying to sit down with you and customize that loan, because that's why these programs were created by Congress, to give you a tool that doesn't exist in market and help you to go to the next phase while we're trying to protect taxpayers' dollars. But that type of coordination and extensive coordination that happens, we will bring all the resources we have to help you out. And I want to mention one example. We just announced, not just, about 2 months ago, with City of Austin, an emerging project agreement. They have a package of $22 billion worth of improvements. Some of it is ITS and a traffic operations center that they're trying to build, a new one in City of Austin. What we want them to do is to be able to access to best practices, to lessons learned from others, to have access to some of our programs. And that's the role that Build America Bureau is playing by partnering with City of Austin, conducting workshops, connecting them to the right people in the industry or to right peers to learn from. And that's the type of cooperative interaction that we are promoting within Build America Bureau to take the silos down, because we can work with all modes. We can work with our research folks, we can work with federal highway, federal transit, federal rail, federal aviation, and through that cooperation, sometimes you'll be able to create a solution, innovative solution, that is more effective and more efficient. And that's what we are trying to promote through our programs.
Yeah, let me just add something here. I just really want to take this opportunity to challenge this audience on making sure we're serving more people, particularly in underserved communities. As we're implementing the bipartisan infrastructure law, we have projects across the country from large, small, and rural areas. We have to make sure that we're looking for really delivering benefits to people. It's not about the technology, it's not about ITS for us, it's about the people and delivering value to American people. Safety, equity, and particularly on climate. And so as we think about digital infrastructure, we really have to think about, those places that haven't applied before, those cities that can't hire the expensive consultant to write the proposal for them. And that's partly where, and that's actually squarely where initiative called Thriving Communities comes in that the department launched. And that really is, we have a commitment to increase the number of applicants that we have who have never received DOT funding before. That includes all infrastructure, but certainly ITS. And so we made a point to make sure that the Thriving Communities effort, you should look it up, has a technology or ITS component, because nowadays any modern project is going to have or should have, where appropriate, ITS components. And so Thriving Communities is another way that we're really thinking about building out capacity and reaching places and people that need to be reached, particularly on our key goals on safety.
Yeah, absolutely. And we couldn't agree more, Robert. It's not about the tech, it's about what it delivers to communities. And at the end of the day, it's our job to understand the technology, right? It's not the job of community members. My peers in my mom worlds at home, they don't understand the benefits of signal priority for a bus. They don't understand that, a school bus pilot with V2X in Georgia allowed children to get to school on time and eat the free breakfast that they were allowed to eat because they were there on time. They don't understand that it might mean that an underserved population gets to work on time and maintains their job because that bus got there faster. But that's where we come in, and that's where our job in this community is explaining how these technologies actually improve lives. So I appreciate everything that you all are doing and the focus and the lens that you've taken about how can we make this technology work for communities and improve lives. So I want to ask you both, what is one piece of information that you hope everyone in this audience knows that may not already know about your individual programs or initiatives or priorities?
I already mentioned one of them, the way that we interact with project sponsors, with private partners is a little bit different than maybe the rest of government. You may not expect the same level of collaboration and coordination at the level that you have, especially when you're negotiating alone with someone. But that's the one thing that I always hear from folks that, wow, like that meeting was great, you're thinking in a different way, you're thinking outside the box. It's not the same way that we expected these programs to work. And that's exactly how we have tried to promote for these programs. We're not just trying to do things the old way. We're constantly trying to come up with new initiatives. We're trying to constantly come up with new ways to take advantage of the flexibilities that legislators have given to us and the mandate that they have given to us to actually help good projects, shovel-worthy projects, get to the implementation phase. And my team is constantly getting feedback from private partners, from public partners, and trying to innovate and come up with those ideas. And we always tell you when we sit down with you in workshops, and by the way, most of those workshops are not in DC. I'm not in DC myself most of the time. We're traveling, we're meeting at different states, at different cities, different local communities, even tribal communities with stakeholders and try to go to where they are because that's how we can bring more people to the table and educate them. In those workshops, we always say that we know that you have been doing things this way for the last 50 years. Let's take a step backward and figure out if there is a better way to do it. And back to what my friend Robert said a few minutes ago, it's all about outcomes. If we identify what outcomes we want to achieve and we know those outcomes are the key things that we want to get to, now we can start thinking about solutions, and heavy civil type projects might be the solution in certain parts of the country. Technology solutions might be better outcome, may give us better outcomes in other parts of the country. But being able to look at all those options, putting them all on the table, evaluating them, and having access to these tools that we are talking about, the expertise, best practices, lessons learned, to look at the ups and downs, opportunities and threats of each one of those solutions and pick the best one, make the best decision. That's what we are trying to get to. So we're not necessarily promoting always for borrowing or using our loans. Many of the projects that we help them may not borrow from us, may find other ways, cheaper ways that they can go and implement, and they don't even need the loan.
Okay, the question was what piece of information should this audience know? Okay, I can't hold my tongue on this because it's just exciting news. And we know that this community, you all have been have persevered, have been tireless in your commitment to deploy what I call interoperable connectivity. And so are we at USDOT. As you know, yesterday, the FCC did grant what's called the lead waiver for the 5.9 ban. So those who are on that waiver or subscribe to it can get moving and deploying CV2X and 5.9 ban, which is a huge effort that many of you have been engaged in. My office, but DOT and across federal government, working with FCC for about a year on a daily, weekly if not daily basis to get us here where we can deploy in the 5.9 ban with those waivers. So that to me is just incredible news and a product of the efforts of many people here in this room. So congratulations to you, and let's get moving with deployment on connectivity.
Thank you. Yes, and we appreciate all of the support from U.S. Department of Transportation. We are thrilled with the FCC's approval of the joint waiver. We are hoping for swift action on the remaining waivers so we can really jumpstart deployment. But we really appreciate and all of the work and support that you've given us on that issue in particular. So we only have a couple minutes left. So I do want to ask one last question of each of you, which is, so looking at the transformation that's happening in the transportation sector right now, and again, the integration of these digital and technology tools in support of all the outcomes that we've talked about, whether it be safety, climate, equity, or all of the above, in 10 years from now, if you think out to 10 years, what do you hope we achieve? Are there any key goals or metrics that you would hope to see in 10 years if we actually can make investments that, to your point, Morteza, marry the physical and the digital tools together?
Okay, I'll go first. I'll start first on the safety side. Again, the department in our national roadway safety strategy, the vision is to 0 fatalities. And I think that it sounds like, can you get to 0? Yes, we can, and we're going to take the step to get there. And so, I think I just keep going back to safety. I mean, it's just so personal. I think many of us have people who have died and been killed in particularly fatal crashes. We can get there. The National Roadway Safety Strategy gives you the way that the department's thinking about it, but also the call to action. What more can you do? What more can your organizations do to get us to 0 fatalities? And I think the Intersection Safety Challenge pushes us towards 0. We're taking steps. And so that's one number or metric is 0 fatalities. I'm going to stick with 0, and we're going to net 0 emissions from the transportation system by 2050. Another audacious goal that we must do. And so I'm looking for more innovation at that intersection of energy, particularly around electrification and vehicles. I think there's a lot there, but there's a lot more that could be done. And we've talked a little bit about that. And so 0 fatalities and net 0 from transportation system.
So I was thinking to myself that, folks always talk about it too, that some of our transportation solutions are expensive. Actually, most of them are super expensive. Building a roadway in U.S. or any other type of infrastructure in U.S. probably costs a lot more than what it costs in other parts of the country. Our resources are limited. The need is just growing because United States is growing. So how can we actually make sure that we can achieve the strategic goals that Robert mentioned in terms of making sure that from environmental perspective, from safety perspective, from equity, from affordability, connectivity, we can actually get to those outcomes, but with limited budget that we have. And I think the only answer to it is to take a better advantage of technology to come up with more effective and efficient solutions. And that's where I think we have to go. I don't think that we have any other choice. So we have to go that way. And moving forward, I think more and more we're going to hear about ITS solutions, technology solutions, that are going to give us maybe the same outcome, but in a different path. More effective, more efficient.
Yeah, and thank you for giving me one more say on this. You said 2040, maybe 2050,
sure.
The future.
Yeah.
But even now, to hit some of these goals of net 0 fatalities, net 0 carbon emissions and costs, I'm going to challenge again the ITS community to think broadly about what ITS means. I think there's innovations in new materials. There's innovations in, certainly in space, underwater, and maritime. So we're really thinking this system of systems. How are all things really, really connected? And for that, the bipartisan infrastructure law created, I think, a breakthrough opportunity for the nation and our community here. And that's the Advanced Research Project Agency for Infrastructure, called ARPA-I. That's just standing up within the Department of Transportation to take on these big challenges and help create the technologies, capabilities that are going to be needed to achieve these audacious goals. And it is modeled after DARPA and ARPA-E to really accelerate technology development, but towards the end of achieving these large, audacious goals that our citizens deserve. And so I want to end with that for ARPA-I.
Thank you. Well, I couldn't agree more with both of your comments. ITS America, we are very excited about ARPA-I and what that brings to the future. And you know, I think that to me, one of the most exciting things about the work that I do, that all of us do, and about ITS technologies in general, again, it's not about the technology, but it's about the fact that once you actually deploy many of these technologies, they have multiple layers of benefits. It's not just one. So you can deploy what we're calling a safety technology, but you are getting climate benefits. You might be getting equity benefits. You might be getting multiple benefits from any one deployment. And to Morteza's point, yes, there's no path forward without really harnessing technology in a way to help us meet our goals, improve our efficiencies, and provide those better outcomes for people every single day who take transportation on our system, regardless of mode. So I want to thank Robert and Morteza for spending time with us today. I want to congratulate USDOT on the big announcements. And we are excited to have you all here this week. So please take time to, to walk the floor and see what we have to offer. And thank you all. Right now, the floor is open. So please take a look around and learn about all the new technologies that we have and how you can partner and deliver them in your own community. Thank you.
Thank you.